And I have looked and looked. And so I have to make it myself. I have made in a laboratory. It supplements all of those things I've talked about that people need on, I would say, almost any diet. But because humans, for instance, don't produce vitamin C, other mammals that do produce vitamin C make somewhere between 2,800 and 20,000 milligrams daily. And so it's really nice to get a boost of about 750 milligrams of vitamin C from this formula, this supplement. It has the real vitamin E, which is very, very rare, say. I take it. Now, here are two exciting studies that I just completed. The bottom one, reducing dietary advanced glycation end products to slow progression of cognitive decline in Alzheimer's disease. This came out in December and actually won awards for the most number of reads. Advanced glycation end products are formed when you barbecue, fry, or broil meat, chicken, fish, beef, pork, those things. It makes a tasty glaze on the top, but it also is extremely dangerous. It goes into the brain and damages the brain. It damages the arteries. It's really helpful to stay away from that. Now, you'll notice I say that only fried, barbecued, or broiled meat. However, if you went into a fast food restaurant or another restaurant and asked for boiled beef, I don't think they'd have it. This is the way it is sold. This is the way it's prepared because that's the way people like it. And that's the way it's really dangerous. The other study on top, reducing dietary lipopolysaccharides to slow progression of cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease, we managed to get in the very prestigious journal Nutrients with extremely high price tag to get in there. It is also, both of these are open source, so you can read them for free, even though us authors have to pay a fortune to get them in there. Lipopolysaccharides are the leftover membranes of bacteria. Now, as I mentioned before, if you pick roadkill up and eat it, it has bacteria that will kill you. But if you cook it first, it kills the bacteria. If you cook it at a high enough temperature for long enough. However, the leftover membranes known as lipopolysaccharides or endotoxins, is their easy name. These endotoxins are absorbed from food into the bloodstream and are the most inflammatory molecule that I have ever thought of. It takes 42 nanograms injected in a person to induce a huge increase of inflammation and actually start damaging memory and thinking ability. So I encourage you, if you're of a scholarly bent, to read these two papers. Advanced glycation end products result in these things called, I call them AGEs, but advanced glycation end products is their long name. They can generate 50 times as many free radical attacks compared to normal proteins. This is where they come from. Chicken, bacon, beef, chicken, chicken, beef, chicken, beef, chicken, turkey, you get the idea. Now, meats don't just contain these advanced glycation end products. They bioaccumulate organochlorine pesticides, terrible cancer producers, terrible for increasing the risk of neurodegenerative diseases, especially Parkinson's disease. Rancid oils. Harmine is something that increases tremors, and essential tremors, something very common, and it's found in, well, also in beer, but also in a lot of these meat products. Arachidonic acid, I'll mention briefly in a minute, and endotoxins, I'm going to talk about some more. I mentioned oxysterols from excess cholesterol, which is found in most of these meat, pork, chicken, eggs. Excess saturated fat, I've mentioned, increasing the risk of heart attacks and strokes and many other diseases like diabetes. And they lack the anti-inflammatory content, these foods. So that's not good. Here is a graph that I wrote and is in one of my articles. And it shows the high advanced glycation end product diet. Factor alpha, a marker of high inflammation, zoomed up. C-reactive protein, another marker of inflammation, zoomed up. When they switched these people to a lower advanced glycation end product, not a great diet, but a lower one, the tumor necrosis factor alpha went down instead of up. and the C-reactive protein went down instead of up compared to the levels that they were eating, before the test. In other words, they're bad. I have this graph that is in my paper on advanced glycation end products. The top amount was found in bacon, 2 slices, butter, 2 tablespoons. Really high amounts of advanced glycation end products resulting in a huge increase in inflammation. And neuroinflammation is one of the real problems in cognition. Inflammation of the arteries is a big problem with heart disease and strokes. And inflammation in the joints is a big problem with osteoarthritis. Beef, tuna, cheese, mayonnaise had still a lot. The olive oil has a little bit, but green beans, apple, carrot, banana, no problem. Whole plant foods are safe. Here's my book, Arthritis Relief. I wrote this to help people understand the dietary associations with osteoarthritis and inflammation. We get inflammation from foods we are not genetically adapted to eat, and that can cause great pain and disability. And I can help a lot with that with Arthritis Relief if you're willing to adjust your diet. And I also talk about various ways you can do it, even if you're not willing to greatly adjust your diet. So reduce inflammation, pain, reduce disability, and that's going to be really good. If you know someone who needs this book, it's available only at drsteveblake.com. Under $10. Arachidonic acid is a fatty acid normally made in our bodies, in all animal bodies. We make just enough to provide normal arterial tone, normal inflammation, and normal clotting. If additional arachidonic acid is taken, in other words, if we eat any animal fat at all, it can cause excess inflammation, pain, arterial constriction, and blood clotting. Here's a little graph. The omega-6 family turns into arachidonic acid. The omega-3 family turns into eicosapentaenoic acid. Most people know this by EPA and think of it as fish oil, but it is actually made in our bodies if we have sufficient of the plant-based omega-3, which is easily found in flaxseed meal and walnuts. We can get just the right amount and make enough EPA if we're well nourished. This shows that arachidonic acid can be made from oils with omega-6, excess omega-6. Turkey, chicken, eggs, and other animal fat have the arachidonic acid pre-made. And the lipoxygenase enzymes create pain and inflammation. However, if we take flax seeds, which have omega-3s, we can make our own EPA, and then the lipoxygenase enzymes make special leukotrienes that reduce pain and inflammation. So it's under our control to a certain extent which of these foods you're eating. So I did a little look to see how much DHA and EPA were in beef, Australian grass-fed, game meat, deer meat. Nope, none. Alpha-linolenic acid was extremely small, something like 1/10 of the amount needed per day. Or less. And even the other essential fatty acid, very low. However, lots of saturated fat and cholesterol. So it's really better to stay away from meat, poultry, and game meats. And I know people sometimes say grass-fed is okay. It's not. This is from Mayer et al. In the journal Lipid. I have a book that I wrote. It's a textbook called Fats and Oils Demystified, also under $10 on my website. And if you want to know all about fats and oils, you can even take the quizzes and exams and find out for yourself which are the saturated fatty acids, which ones are harmful, which ones are helpful. No saturated fat is necessary for humans. We only need 2 essential fatty acids. And I'll bet a lot of the nutrition experts at The Real Truth About Health would have a hard time even naming the 2 essential fatty acids, which are alpha-linolenic acid for the omega-3s and linoleic acid for the omega-6. Endotoxins, or lipopolysaccharides, as I mentioned, are killed during the cooking of meat. The leftover parts trigger inflammation, incredible inflammation. Without eating these foods, inflammation reduces. This can help people We're seeing people in the clinic who actually are thinking more clearly with better memory, dramatic results, because they're not eating animal products anymore, or at least just reducing them. For 2 hours after a meal high in animal fat, inflammation is raised in the entire body. Endotoxins from the leftover cells of bacterial cells. Here is a little figure that I drew that describes how it works. If you eat these cheese and meat, for example, that have the endotoxins in them, what if you ate less? You would have less of this lipopolysaccharide in your plasma, less lipopolysaccharides binding protein, less plasma CD14. Now, the cluster differentiation 14 is the one that allows the lipopolysaccharides to go and attach to the toll-like receptor 4. And that activates nuclear factor kappa B, and that activates cytokines, highly inflammatory cytokines, such that in one study, they fed a test meal with a high amount of these lipopolysaccharides in it, and it raised the cytokines 65 times within 2 hours. Isn't that amazing? What was the test meal? You have to look down to the fine print. It was a thin crust pizza. With less cytokines, you have less neuroinflammation because cytokines go right up into the brain. And less neuroinflammation means better cognition. How long does it take? We've seen results in weeks to months. It really helps the brain. Which foods have a lot of this LPS or endotoxins? Now, noting that it only takes about 40 to 60 nanograms in order to trigger an inflammatory reaction in the body. How much does a serving of macaroni and cheese have? 2,200,000. Okay, noting that it takes about 50 nanograms to create a tremendous inflammation and interfere with thinking, what about minced turkey? 1,800,000. Cheese and onion rolls, 1,300,000. Minced pork, 1,100,000. And down the list with pork sausage rolls, turkey, hamburger patty, infant formula milk powder. Heartbreaking studies on infant formula milk powder having tremendous amounts of inflammatory lipopolysaccharides in them. Lobster, I couldn't find numbers for other fish, but lobster was quite high. Pork, spaghetti with bologna, minced beef and onion pie, skim milk and milk all have a lot of these. Now you may think, well, milk, 1 cup, only 12,000, but it only took 42 nanograms in one study to jack up those cytokines 60 times. They damage brain neurons. They're found in the bloodstream of people who eat meat, chicken, fish, or dairy products. In fact, they're found within an hour after eating it. Shown to induce an inflammatory reaction that activates microglia and irreversible damage to brain cells. Microglia are like the police force of the brain. They do a good job like a cop walking the beat, but I guess if you somehow gave too much amphetamine and a bunch of heavy artillery to a cop, that'd be like a activated microglia. They just start attacking healthy brain neurons. We'll pause for a moment. Okay, so another of my books, Parkinson's Disease, Dietary Regulation of Dopamine. This is perhaps my best-selling book because there are not a lot of good solutions drug-wise to Parkinson's. Certainly, levodopa works and is helpful. And sometimes people need brain surgery. But there are many ways to help with Parkinson's disease and many ways to avoid getting it in the first place. Again, this book is available on my website for under $10, drsteveblake.com. Inflammation from foods we're not genetically adapted to can damage and kill our brain cells. Now, I mentioned fiber briefly. Fiber is really important to reduce inflammation. 20 grams of fiber is not enough. That's what you might get on an American diet. good day. It looks like it was, yeah, that's what it was. And a whole plant food diet, this one got 77 grams of fiber, which is perfect. Lots of pectins, gums, and mucilage, types of fibers that are soothing and very, very helpful for digestion. Perfect digestion. So are we omnivores? Are we plant eaters? Are we carnivores? I hope that I've made it clear that we fit in down there with Mr. Gorilla and not so close to the dogs and tigers. I want to thank you very much for your patience in listening to this. And it's fun with all the animal pictures. And I hope that, if you are a meat eater, you won't be offended. It'll give you food for thought. If you've already switched over, then I hope that this will give you some validation that you can continue eating healthy. And I see that Michael has popped back up. Hello, Michael.
How you doing, Steve? Great presentation.
Thank you.
As always. So thank you very much. Very informative. So we're going to begin the Q&A portion, and I see that you've told people how to get all of your stuff. So that's great. And okay, and then so if they want to get in touch with you, they can just email you at steve@drsteveblake.com.
Right.
That's why.
Yeah. Direct to me. Yes.
All right. Excellent. So let me get my questions out here. And if anybody has any questions for Steve, you can go ahead and raise your hand in Zoom, and you'll be able to ask a question should we have time. And the directions are in the chat. So bear with me one split second. So in your clinical study at the Hawaii Alzheimer's Disease Center, did you find any common dietary patterns among participants who showed cognitive impairment?
Well, yes, of course, and more so in the study diet to modify risk of Alzheimer's disease that's just been published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease. In fact, it's pending publication. It is in a pre-published format right now. Well, which diet would be the most helpful to avoid Alzheimer's disease and other problems with cognition? This would be a whole food plant diet, and I would also recommend supplementing that diet with things that might be low in a good plant-based diet. The best diets include lots of fruits, lots of vegetables, lots of whole grains and beans and nuts and seeds. This pretty much will cover human nutritional needs as far as we can get them. And so these are the diets that's the best we can do to avoid Alzheimer's disease. I will say that mental exercise, for me reading those studies and writing them, and physical exercise also very, very helpful to keep your brain sharp as we age.
Great, thank you. And you mentioned beans, and we just had Brian Clement speak before you, and he is not a fan of cooking food. What are your thoughts on, and I know you went through the dangers of cooking meat and all that kind of stuff. What about cooking beans and other plant-based foods? Does that lessen their nutritional value to the point where they are not good for you? Or what are your thoughts on cooking?
Well, let's be realistic. We counsel real people in a real clinic. And if I were to tell people to go all raw, they'd leave cartoon character cutouts in the door as they left. It's simply too radical a diet for people to even consider. Also, it is very difficult to get well-nourished on a raw diet. It's possible. Yes, it is. But it is difficult. And you need a knowledgeable expert like the one you just mentioned. And he's fabulous at that. If you're going to eat all raw, then you would need to sprout beans in order to supplement that diet. That's really important. And I would say nuts and seeds. Now, Brian Clement also doesn't like to eat too much fruit because of the excess sugars that can be there. I analyzed a diet that was advocated by a guy named Doug Brandt, and his diet was about eating just raw fruit. And analyzing that diet, I came up to well over 300 grams per day of sugar. That's glucose, fructose, and sucrose. Just those three sugars made up over, well, like 383 grams per day of the diet. So that the calories were coming about 40% from pure sugar. And this was not a very healthy diet. Protein was extremely low. Many of the vitamins and minerals were not acceptable at all. I was surprised that by including 2 pounds of figs a day, which is a little unrealistic, chewing up those fig seeds gave him not enough vitamin E, but at least a little bit of vitamin E. So what I would say is healthy would be to advocate for a high raw diet. In other words, as much raw foods as you and your digestion, your budget, your kitchen, your cook will allow. And so a high raw diet would be eating lots of raw things. One of the easiest foods to eat raw is, I think, oatmeal. And if you take rolled oats and you soak them overnight, not just for a few minutes, but all the way overnight, and you can also soak in dried fruit, or you can put in fresh fruit in the morning and eat that, you can get a very healthy breakfast. Now, we like to put avocados in our oatmeal because we live on an avocado orchard in Maui. That's one reason. And also because they're fatty and delicious. And they also are not high in sugar. So Brian Clement would approve of that. So that's one example of a fruit. There are others that you could put in there and other things. But that soaked oats is a real nice start on a raw diet. Something for people to try, a concrete way to do it. And then just make sure that what you do eat for lunch and dinner and snacks has a high component of raw food in it. Snacks, if they could be fruits, many fruits. Now, talking about sugar and you want to look at blood sugar. You don't just want to look at sugar that people eat, okay? So if you look at different fruits like pears and apples have a very low glycemic load. So if you eat an apple, your blood sugar does not spike, and it is not damaging. It's not cancer causing. It doesn't increase your risk of yeast or fungus or anything like that. It's very slow releasing. Now, if you ate 2 or 3 bananas in a row, it would spike your blood sugar a little bit. That's true. So you have to be careful which fruits. Berries are well known to be low in blood sugar, and don't raise your blood sugar much. They have a low glycemic load. Never use the glycemic index. Always use glycemic load because index is inaccurate. But using the glycemic load index, you can see that if you were to sprinkle even half a cup of fresh blueberries on your oatmeal in the morning, this will not cause a spike in blood sugar, but give you tremendously brain protective anthocyanins and plenty of carotenoids and really excellent things.
Great, thank you. And how about stuff like dried fruit, like dates and stuff like that people use as sweeteners?
Dates are an amazing sweetener because they don't seem to raise blood sugar much. And so they could be incorporated as a sweetener in a lot of foods. But when you get into date sugar, then you're getting something that's going to absorb a lot faster. So the whole intact, uncooked dates are the ones that would be the best for that.
Great, thank you. So how do your findings from the Hawaii dementia prevention trial compare with traditional pharmaceutical approaches to dementia prevention?
If you only knew, Michael, how poorly the pharmaceutical interventions work with Alzheimer's disease. The chief drug is donepezil or Aricept, and this is. You want to hear the whole story on it?
Sure.
Really?
Well,
okay.
How about the time-appropriate version of the story? How about that?
Okay, I'll make it a short, awful version. So this is a principal drug used in clinics today for Alzheimer's disease. It doesn't help a lot of people, and the people it helps for a short period of time, and the side effects can be really atrocious. But if you look at the roots of it, you can see why the side effects are so bad. Because this same chemical was originally developed by the Nazis as nerve gas and then used widely as organophosphate insecticide. And then it was picked up by the drug companies to be used in a diluted form for Alzheimer's disease. This is the chief drug used for it. Another one is memantine, doesn't have the same history. But so these drugs aren't too effective. However, as I mentioned, The nutritional changes are very effective. We see this on a daily basis in the Maui Memory Clinic, and we've seen it at Hawaii Pacific Neuroscience, and in our trial at the Hawaii Alzheimer's Disease Center. This makes a huge difference. As I mentioned, they went from starting dementia to normal in 9 months, just with dietary and nutrient changes. Fantastic.